All right, so today we're going to look at the Civil War, and we're really going to focus on the early flow of the war. We're not going to get into the details of any battle, but we are going to examine kind of how the way the battles go and where the battles are taking place, how that impacts the decisions that people are making, like Abraham Lincoln and others, as to what they want to do in the war. And so let's get started. So first thing we need to understand, one of the things we need to know, is what we call the Eastern Theater and the Western Theater. So if this circle area, this area that I've got this black highlighted or area here, this is approximately the Appalachian Mountains. Then on one side, the eastern side, is the Eastern Theater, and then everything over here is the Western Theater. And one of the things you may right off notice is that most of the fighting is happening in the South. Very little. There's a couple battles here and here, Gettysburg and Antietam, that you'll notice happening in the Union territory. But most of the fighting is actually taking place in the South. And then more fighting is happening in the Eastern Theater than in the Western Theater. Now this map is not showing anywhere close to all the battles in any way. It's showing many of the most important battles, but it's not anywhere close to all the battles. But that's just some kind of basic vocabulary. We have an Eastern Theater of the war and a Western Theater of the war. So how does that flow of the war take place? What's going on here? Well, so 1861 is when the war starts. So the bombardment of Fort Sumter in 1861 is the beginning of the war. And this is in April of 1861. But there's not much fighting that happens in 1861 other than the First Battle of Bull Run. Now, it's a major battle. This is the kind of the famous story here where people talk about the people coming to kind of have a picnic and watch the battle. And both sides think, well, they're going to whip the other side. And once that battle's over, the other side's going to, if the Union loses, they're going to give up and say, okay, you can have your own country, Confederacy. And if the Confederacy loses, the Union thinks that, then the Confederacy will give up and they'll join back with the Union. So that doesn't turn out to be the case. The Confederacy does win, but the war everybody realizes how bloody this war is going to be, and it does drag on. And so one of the things you may notice here is I've got several that are in red. These are all battles that took place in the Eastern Theater. And then in the blue are battles that took place in the Western Theater. And so one of the things you quickly notice in the Western, after that first victory by the Confederacy, most of the major fighting is happening in the Western Theater, and the Union is winning. So we tend to think of the Confederacy doing really well at the beginning of the Civil War, which is somewhat accurate, but that's when we ignore the Western Theater. In the West, things are going really well, and this is a problem for the Confederacy. In the Eastern Theater, we don't really get started too much until mid-1862. 7 Days Battle is a big one. And we are going to notice here, 7 days, Second Bull Run, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, all major victories for the Confederacy. And in some case, and these are some of the bloodiest and worst fighting of the entire war. But there's obviously one that's been starred in the middle, and that is Antietam. And so Antietam is the bloodiest day in the war. It's the bloodiest single day in the war. It's not the bloodiest battle. It's not the most killed or wounded of all battles. It's in the top, but it is the worst single day. It's a one-day battle. Gettysburg has the distinction of being the bloodiest battle in the war, but Gettysburg is a 3-day battle. So Antietam is a victory for the Union. And the other thing you may have noticed from the map is that Antietam is actually in a Union state. And so it is one of the times when the Confederacy attacks into the Union. And there's two major battles that we talk about with that, Antietam and Gettysburg, both Union victories. And Antietam is only kind of a Union victory. On the field of battle, it was kind of a draw. But the Confederacy realizes that they're not going to be able to accomplish their mission, and they need to they need to leave. And so as the first day of the battle, which turns out to be the only day of the battle, kind of draws to a close, the Confederate generals realize it's better for us to leave. And so they retreat in the middle of the night. And so that is a victory for the Union. So this is key. This battle at Antietam is key because it informs Abraham Lincoln's decision. Because the war, as we see, has been going so badly for the Union, he decides we've got to do something. We need to make a change here. And the war has become more and more, slavery has been the key issue all along, but more and more Lincoln is realizing that we're going to fight this war. Slavery is going to have to be dealt with. And so he decides this is how he's going to deal with it. And that's with the Emancipation Proclamation. And so there was defeat after defeat that the Confederacy had been, that the Union had experienced at the hands of the Confederacy. And so the war was not going well for the Union, and Lincoln wants to issue this Emancipation Proclamation, which would declare the slaves in the rebel states, in the Confederate states, free. Now, it wouldn't actually free them because they're not listening to Lincoln and the United States anymore. They say they're their own country. But Lincoln doesn't want to issue the Emancipation Proclamation after a defeat, or he doesn't want it to look like the Union is desperate. He wants to make it look like this is a decision we're making from a point of strength. And so after this victory at Antietam, he then issues the Emancipation Proclamation, says this is what's coming, and in it, as I said, it declares the slaves in the Confederate States free. It also calls for the beginning to recruit black military units. The most famous of these will be the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, but many others as well. This also helps them with their relations with Britain and France, helps the Union, because anti-slavery nations like Britain and France will not get involved on behalf of the Confederacy, because what this has done is made this not just a war about keeping the Confederate States in the Union, but has now made it about ending slavery. And so this war, whereas Lincoln had said before, this is a war to save the Union. This is the war to say that the Confederate States, you do not have the right to leave the United States. Just because you joined, it doesn't mean you can say, now I'm going to leave. Once you're in the United States, you're always in. Well, this war is not just about that anymore. Now it is about ending slavery as well. And the Emancipation Proclamation is what does that.